March 18, 1944. 1:42 hours. The English coast was blacked out so completely that even the sea looked like it had been erased. Inside a low concrete hut on the cliffs near Dover, a green radar tube pulsed and hissed, painting the night in thin lines of light. Second Officer Evelyn Hart sat with her headset pressed tight to her hair, eyes fixed on the scope the way a pilot fixes on the horizon. 23 years old. A volunteer from London. Trained fast, trained hard, and then quietly pushed into the midnight shift because men with medals didn't like taking direction from a woman without a uniform's weight. She wasn't supposed to be in the operations chair. Not officially. The station commander tolerated her because she was calm, because she didn't panic, because she could read a screen like it was a language. Tonight, the channel was restless. Weather fronts moved like bruises across the map. A bomber stream had gone deep into Germany and was now trying to claw its way back. The air was full of returns, friendly aircraft, ghost echoes, false blips caused by rain, the occasional blur of something low and fast that might be German. At 1:42, the duty controller, Flight Lieutenant Mercer, leaned over her shoulder with a pencil behind his ear and impatience in his voice. Anything, he asked. Evelyn didn't look away. Plenty. Anything real? She traced one faint return that wasn't behaving like the others. It wasn't sliding cleanly along a route. It wasn't climbing or descending in the normal pattern. It drifted, dropped, steadied, like something wounded, trying not to die. Track 72, she said. Westbound. Low. Slowing. Mercer glanced at the plot board. There's no scheduled inbound there. That's why it's bothering me. He exhaled like she'd offered superstition. Rain. Evelyn adjusted the gain. The blip sharpened, then smeared again. The operator beside her muttered, half asleep. Could be sea clutter. Evelyn shook her head. Not at that speed. Mercer pointed at the bigger, brighter returns, organized, confident formations of bombers coming home the way rules said they should. Focus on the stream, Hart. She didn't argue. Not yet. Because arguing didn't move aircraft. It only moved blame. But she kept the ghost in the corner of her eye. 1:47. The return flickered, briefly split, then became one again. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Split returns sometimes meant aircraft breaking apart. Sometimes it meant two planes flying in near contact. Sometimes it meant a bomber shedding altitude so violently it confused the scope. Track 72 is dropping, she said louder now. Mercer frowned. How far out? She did the mental arithmetic without writing it down. 25 miles. Maybe less. A friendly that far-off course would have been reported. Unless its radio's gone, she said. Mercer's mouth opened to reply, then the station telephone rang. A sharp, urgent ring that cut through the hum of equipment. A clerk picked it up, listened, and looked across the room with sudden gravity. Bandits reported, the clerk called. Coastal observers, possible fighters crossing the channel at low altitude. Evelyn's eyes snapped back to the screen. One low return could be a struggling bomber. Several low returns moving fast could be something else entirely. And then the ghost changed again. 1:50. Track 72 staggered, then turned slightly, like a man who hears footsteps behind him and tries to run on broken legs. Evelyn felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. That's not weather, she said. That's a bomber trying to stay alive. Mercer finally leaned closer, squinting, as if doubt had a visual range. Why would one bomber be alone that low? Because it's been hit, Evelyn thought. Because it can't hold altitude. Because it's dragging men home through hell. She reached for the plotting pencil and marked the track with a small, decisive circle. Request scramble, she said. Mercer laughed once, short and sharp. We're not scrambling for a phantom. Evelyn's voice stayed flat. If it's a phantom, no harm done. If it's not, Mercer snapped, and we scramble without authorization, I'll be writing reports until Christmas. Evelyn stared at the weak blip on her screen. Reports. Paper. Ink. All things that never fell out of the sky. She heard herself speak with the steadiness that had gotten her promoted and resented. If we don't scramble and it's real, she said, we'll be writing letters to families. The room went quiet for half a second. Even the sleepy operator stopped chewing his gum. Mercer looked at her the way someone looks at a door that might be locked. You don't have the authority. Evelyn didn't blink. Then use yours. Mercer hesitated. A tiny gap in time where careers battled conscience. On the scope, The ghost wavered again, then steadied, still moving west, still trying. Evelyn moved first. She reached past Mercer and keyed the line to fighter control. Fighter control, this is Dover Station, she said, voice clipped, professional, leaving no room for debate. Possible friendly straggler inbound, low, damaged, pursuit. Request immediate interception patrol, Vector 180, to intercept track 72, 20 miles out. Mercer's face drained of color. Heart. The voice on the other end of the line was sharp. Dover, confirm hostile? Evelyn watched the screen and saw 3 new returns snap into existence. Thin, fast, coming in from the east like knives. Hostiles likely, she said. 3 contacts closing. Friendly is low and slowing. There was a pause. Then the words she needed, clean as a gunshot. Scramble approved. Stand by for updates. Mercer stared at her like she'd just stepped off a cliff and expected the air to catch her. Evelyn didn't celebrate. She only watched. Because out there, somewhere over the black water, a bomber was coming home on instinct. And now, the night would meet it with something other than silence. 158 hours. The ghost was closer now. Close enough that Evelyn could almost imagine the shape. For engines, 1 coughing, a tail that had taken hits, a crew bleeding in the dark while the pilot kept the nose pointed west. The 3 fast returns tightened their curve. German fighters didn't need radar to hunt a wounded bomber. They needed only the glow of exhaust and the certainty that the prey couldn't climb. Evelyn spoke into her headset. Fighter control, the bandits are closing. Friendly is at 10 miles off coast. Low. Mercer paced behind her like a caged thing. Do you realize what you've done? I've asked for help, she said. You've overruled procedure. She didn't look up. Procedure isn't up there. Outside, wind shoved against the hut. Somewhere beyond the concrete, the sea swallowed every sound. It could have been peaceful if you forgot what was flying through it. At 2:04 the first RAF fighters checked in. 2 Spitfires, voices young and confident, fuel full, guns loaded. Control, this is Blue 2. We're at Angels 15, inbound. Evelyn imagined them. Dark silhouettes under a starless sky. Engines smooth, pilots with hands that hadn't started shaking yet. Blue 2, fighter control answered. Vector 210, descend to Angels 8. Intercept bandits closing on friendly. Evelyn's eyes tracked the converging lines. They're too high, she said suddenly. Mercer stopped. What? Evelyn pointed. The bandits. They're above the friendly, but they'll dive. If the Spits go straight in, they'll miss them. Fighter control didn't ask for her opinion. They didn't even know she was on the line. Only that Dover station kept feeding information like a heartbeat. Evelyn recalculated. The German fighters were likely using the bomber's line as bait, waiting to slash through and climb away. If the Spitfires chased, they'd be dragged east, away from the bomber, leaving it exposed again. Fighter control, she said, voice tight. Recommend you hold Blue 2 back. Keep them above and ahead, not behind. The bandits want pursuit. A pause. Then, unexpectedly, Dover, confirm. Mercer's eyes widened. They were listening. Evelyn felt the weight of it. One wrong call, and she'd be the reason pilots died. She stared at the screen until it felt like staring through the glass into the night itself. Confirm, she said. If Blue 2 stays high and cuts across, they'll meet the dive. If they chase, they'll lose the bomber. The controller didn't argue. He altered the vector. Blue 2, adjust heading 190. Hold Angels 10. Wait for the drop. The Spitfire pilot replied, a grin audible in his voice. Understood. We'll wait. Tell the Yanks we're coming. Evelyn flinched at the word. Yanks. That meant the bomber was American. B-17 or B-24, most likely. It meant 10 men, cold and exhausted, trusting the dark to carry them home. On the scope, the 3 fast returns lifted slightly, then broke downward in a clean, predatory arc. They're diving, Evelyn said. Blue 2. Now, fighter control snapped. Evelyn watched the lines converge. For 2 seconds the screen became a knot of light. Then 2 of the fast returns split hard, one left, one right, like startled birds. The third continued toward the bomber, committed. One bandit still in, Evelyn said. Mercer leaned over her shoulder. He wasn't angry anymore. He was watching, helpless and human. Blue 2, Bandits still pressing, the controller barked. A new voice cut in, another RAF pilot, older, harsher. I've got him. On the scope, the committed bandit jerked upward, an evasive climb. Evelyn imagined tracer fire stitching the dark. She imagined a German pilot glancing over his shoulder and finding death where he expected easy victory. The bandit's return flickered, then dropped away fast. Bandit breaking off, Evelyn said, barely breathing. The bomber's return, track 72, continued west, still low, still alive. For a moment, no one spoke in the hut. Even Mercer stood still, as if movement would change the outcome. Then the bomber blip wavered again, losing speed, losing altitude. Evelyn's heart sank. It's not safe yet, she whispered. The German fighters hadn't vanished. They'd only been interrupted. They would circle, reform, and try again the moment the RAF escorts drifted away. And the bomber, whatever damage it carried, was still bleeding time into the sea. 212, the controller's voice sharpened. Dover, any more contacts? Evelyn scanned the scope. The two bandits that had split were climbing eastward, retreating, but not gone. And farther out, faint new returns, 4, maybe 5, too far to be certain. She swallowed. Possible additional hostiles, she said. Long range. Faint. Mercer exhaled through his teeth. If you're wrong. If I'm wrong, Evelyn said. We keep fighters in the air longer than needed. If you're right. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The controller responded with urgency. Blue 2, stay with friendly until coast. No heroics. The Spitfire pilot laughed once. Copy. We'll be his shadow. Evelyn watched track 72 crawl toward the coastline like a man crawling toward light. And in that slow movement, she understood something she hadn't before. A radar screen wasn't just a tool. It was a battlefield where seconds were bodies. 2:26 hours. Track 72 crossed the coastline. The Ghost entered England. Evelyn felt the first release of tension in her shoulders, like her body finally remembered it had bones. But relief didn't arrive cleanly. Not yet. The bomber was still low, still slow, and now it had to land. Over the radio, the bomber's voice finally came through, broken, strained, American. Control, this is Fortress. Static chewed the words. We're hit. Losing hydraulics. Request. Any field. The controller answered. Steady. Fortress, you are over friendly territory. Maintain heading. You have escort. Safe fuel state. A pause. Then low. Evelyn closed her eyes for half a second. Low fuel, low altitude, damaged systems. A bomber could survive fighters and still die to a runway it couldn't reach. Mercer moved closer. His voice had changed. Which group is it? He asked softly, as if the name mattered to the dead. Evelyn listened. The voice came again, clearer now. 364th, 6 lost over target. We've got wounded aboard. Wounded. Not just shaken men. Bleeding men. Evelyn leaned into the line again. Fighter control, advise nearest emergency strip. Friendly is damaged and low. The controller snapped out instructions. A field inland, lights masked, ground crews alerted. The Spitfires stayed with the bomber like guard dogs, circling, scanning the dark for any last German desperation. 241. The bomber dropped off the radar momentarily as it passed behind terrain, then reappeared weaker, lower. Evelyn felt her fingernails digging into her palm. Come on, she whispered, as if the aircraft could hear her through the glass. When the bomber disappeared again, this time for longer, Mercer sucked in breath. Did it crash? Evelyn forced herself to breathe. Wait. The screen stayed empty where track 72 had been. 10 seconds. 15. Then, suddenly, a new return, slow, near stationary. A landing. A heavy aircraft on the ground. Evelyn's throat tightened. She didn't cheer. She only sat very still, as if moving might undo it. The radio crackled. A British voice, clipped and astonished. Fortress is down. Hard landing. She's intact. Mercer closed his eyes and let his head fall forward for a moment, like a man admitting defeat to emotion. Evelyn removed her headset slowly. The room around her seemed different, smaller, quieter, like the war had stepped out for a breath. And then the consequence arrived. At 3:10, the station commander came into the hut in his greatcoat, face stern, boots wet with night air. Behind him were two officers Evelyn recognized only by insignia and attitude. Mercer straightened immediately. "Sir." The commander's eyes moved to Evelyn. "Miss Hart." She stood. Her legs felt unsteady, not from fear. She'd already spent it all, but from the aftershock. "You initiated an unauthorized scramble," the commander said. Evelyn met his gaze. "I requested a patrol based on radar contact consistent with a friendly straggler and hostile intercept." "That's a lovely sentence," one of the other officers said, thinly. "It means you broke protocol." Evelyn didn't argue. If she argued, they'd make it about rules. She needed it to stay about lives. Mercer opened his mouth, perhaps to defend her, but the commander held up a hand. "I've already spoken to fighter control," the commander said. "They confirm your vectoring was accurate." Evelyn's chest rose and fell once. "And," the commander continued, tone shifting by a fraction, "the bomber you tracked carried a liaison team. One of them is an intelligence officer with material retrieved on the Berlin run. He's alive because that aircraft landed." The room seemed to tilt, not because Evelyn cared about papers, but because she understood what those papers meant. Raids planned, targets chosen, perhaps fewer men dying tomorrow because information made war more precise. The officer with the thin smile stopped smiling. The commander stepped closer to Evelyn, voice lower now, so it became something private. "You weren't supposed to be in that chair," he said. "But you were, and you did the job." Evelyn swallowed. "Yes, sir." He nodded once, like an acknowledgement he didn't want to give but couldn't deny. "There will be a report," he said. "There is always a report." Of course. War loved paperwork almost as much as it loved bodies. "But," he added, "there will also be a commendation." Mercer's eyes widened. The commander turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Miss Hart." "Yes, sir?" His gaze held hers for a moment. "Do it again," he said quietly. "If you have to." Then he was gone, swallowed by the corridor and the night. Evelyn sat back down slowly. The radar tube continued to pulse, indifferent, painting green lines across the darkness as more aircraft came home and more lives balanced on thin decisions. She looked at the empty space where Track 72 had been and imagined the bomber on a muddy strip inland. Men climbing out, shaking, alive, looking up at the sky as if they'd been returned to the world by a hand they'd never see. Evelyn reached for her headset again. Because the war didn't care what anyone was supposed to do. It only cared who did it when it mattered.